in regards to the Reserve Bank and where it sits right now, interest rate rises could come as early as this year if inflation and therefore wages start to rise. Do you imagine that that could happen and you could be the Treasurer who's actually having to try and preside over that?
Well, good afternoon, Ross. I thought that was a really welcome contribution broadly from the Reserve Bank Governor today. It's always good to get an insight into the thinking of the Governor and the Board as they deal with the economy as it hopefully recovers strongly from the worst part of the pandemic. I think the Governor's been pretty clear that interest rates won't stay near zero forever, obviously. And nobody expects that to be the case. That has absolutely nothing to do with who wins the next election. They can't be near zero forever. But also the Reserve Bank seems to be indicating to people that they're in no rush, that they want to be convinced that interest rate hikes are necessary. And so, like everybody, we respect the independence of the RBA board. We'll keep an eye on their the contribution they make to the economic conversation. Obviously, in the future, if interest rates do go up, it'll be difficult for families, and so the bank has to weigh that up too.
OK, can I just go to one aspect of it which clearly has got to be a tick for the government, and that is the unemployment rate falling into the threes. The Reserve Bank is now forecasting that. That surely is welcome and indeed has got to be one of the hallmarks of the government in this recovery phase.
Well, obviously we want that unemployment rate to be as low as possible because we want to see some of that pressure on wages, but it hasn't been there so far. We need to think about the labour market as broader than just the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate matters. We want it as low as possible. But we also need to understand that there's job insecurity. We've had stagnant wages growth, as you know, for much of the last 8 or 9 years. So when you look at the labour market more broadly, there are some encouraging signs, but also some substantial weaknesses in wages and job security. And we've also got this issue where we've got about 1.5 million Australians who are either unemployed or underemployed at the same time as we've got these skill shortages emerging in the economy. So the labour market more broadly is a mixed bag. We want unemployment to be as low as possible, but we need to have some perspective there when we talk about that number.
But I'll take it to you. The unemployment rate is the unemployment rate, and underemployment is certainly always there, but the participation rate is higher than it's ever been. You know, go back to July 2020, you told the ABC at that time the absolute key test, the government, the opposition, any decision maker in an economy should be judged on what happens to unemployment. And what happens to unemployment too? We've had an issue there before the crisis. Unemployment's now lower than it has ever been for 50 years. So this is, again, got to show the strength of the Australian economy, the strength even of some of the government's measures.
Well, again, Ross, I mean, we want that number as low as possible, and when it goes down rather than up, we welcome that. We've done that repeatedly. After I said that, we saw there were some months subsequent to that where unemployment, the number of unemployed Australians rose markedly. You know, there was about 56,000 Australians in Treasury's estimation after the withdrawal of JobKeeper who lost their job as a consequence, for example. You know, there has been months since I made those comments where a substantial amount of Australians have lost their jobs. More broadly, I've said repeatedly now, as I said to you a moment ago, we want the unemployment rate to be as low as possible. The labour market is broader than just the unemployment rate. Let's get wages growth going again. Let's deal with job insecurity. Those two challenges are related, and they are in many ways the defining challenges as the economy recovers. The Reserve Bank Governor was talking today and yesterday in the statement that the board released that there are some encouraging signs in the economy. We want it to recover strongly. We expect it to recover strongly, but it's not the right kind of recovery if people aren't getting that wages growth that they need and deserve and have been missing out on for much of the last 8 or 9 years.
OK, there's a couple of points here I want to go to. One is the wages recovery, because you, as a potential future Treasurer, will also have to deal with unions when enterprise bargaining agreements come up. But you, as a Treasurer, will try and keep those as low as possible, despite the fact, of course, you've got a situation where inflation's rising and therefore wages growth. There'll be pressure there. Are you going to deal with those unions in a strong manner?
Oh, well, obviously we want what's best for the economy, Ross, and the thing that's been the problem for a large chunk of the last 8 or 9 years is the absence of that wages growth has flown through to some of the other challenges in the economy. And so obviously, you know, we don't want a free-for-all on wages, but there hasn't been that for some time. There hasn't been substantial wages growth for some time. It's been at or near historic lows for much of recent years. And so we need to get wages growing again. And in industrial relations, there has been an issue with the tearing up of agreements. There's been an issue around labour hire undercutting people's wages. There's job insecurity in the gig economy and more broadly, and in the care economy. So we need sensible, responsible, sustainable wages growth, because that will be good for the economy more broadly when that disposable income finds its ways into the small businesses and local economies of this country.
Okay, one final point for you. With lower interest rates has come rising, rocketing house prices in capital cities. So many of your potential voters are being squeezed out, or if they don't have a house, are really finding it tough to buy a house. Now, that comes through wages growth, that comes through a bunch of other things. But housing affordability also goes potentially to the policy you took to the last election, negative gearing. And the suggestion is, of course, that post the next election, you might try and deal with this by also dealing with negative gearing. Is it really off the agenda or not?
It's off the agenda, Ross. We've made that really clear. The people expressed a view about that proposal at the last election. You know, housing affordability is obviously a big problem, and we've got to work out the best way we can deal with it, consistent with our commitments to be responsible economic managers. That's why we've said the highest priority is around social and affordable housing, particularly for people who are finding it hard to live near where they work, and that's why we've got that Housing Future Fund. That's the best place to start, but we won't be doing the negative gearing policy that we took to the last election.
Jim Chalmers, always great to have you on the program and good to speak with you today.
Appreciate the opportunity, Ross. All the best.